Here are poems from the collection that I call Como Poems, written after I returned to the old neighborhood in 2011. The first, The Convent's Gone. It was an Irish parish, built in 1927. The convent's gone. The rectory and church are for sale. So many old parishes closed because the bishops divested real estate to pay for pedophile lawsuits. A dusty film on the church's bricks recall the confusion and spiritual feelings that arose in me. At 13, I was St. Joseph in a living nativity. My sister Mary, the Holy Mother Mary. She held our Tony as the crying baby Jesus. He was 4 months old. Now he's 50. I learned the Latin Mass, integrity, punctuality, responsibility, and joy. Here, half my family married. My brother John was buried from here. My grandparents, too. The dust is shaking from my old feelings. Como neighbors. I bought this simple city house near a great park, a small lake, and those hidden places where I ran as a boy. Last night, my old neighbor telephoned from his cabin in the wooded Wisconsin coulee where I raised my son. I can no longer afford that wilderness, but I do enjoy the squabbling squirrels circling the trunk of my new neighbor's maple. In the wild, I learned to exchange sounds with others and not feel silly. On this morning, a small toad hops into my screen porch and we talk, neighborly. After one too many mornings, the tears arrived. The obituary page says a young child has died. A beautiful woman has died. And a friend from school, too. My tears have pushed from the inside out. Bits of grass push out of the icy ground. A bright cardinal sings on a branch, while the tree buds sway in the wind, and my tears blur the gray sunlight. Timothy, living is an honor. You deserve another round of beauty. Tears, dust, and warmth are yours, too, as you sit near your dying father. This corner of the park has no gates. Once a part of an Irish parish, this corner of the park has no gates, no statues, benches, or playground. Its black trees supported my innocence, my ignorance, and the last desires of my boyhood. The dirt paths I knew then are now grassy ruts beneath old oaks. Because I look for paths, I find them. 50 years ago, Granny and I hurried through dawn's shadows so I could serve Mass, and she could pray at St. Andrew's. When the parish school closed, archangels stopped playing in the hidey holes and hollow trees. I'm here again, alone, watching another old man sadly walk into a copse of weepy spruce. Leaves fall like slow snow from the chestnuts and bur oaks. Beneath their spreading crown, the expanse is too open for secrets. But the park gives me the old paths, and a casual transit toward the holy. First Communion. Timothy, what did you imagine First Communion to be? Trumpets calling from the choir loft? Garlands and flowers on the altar rail? The simple nun was a door between your curiosity and an answer, and a corona glowed from behind her silhouette. Her shaming finger had you examine yesterdays, as few as they were, and a pattern of learning was set. When you played in a cubby hole in a railroad bridge, pylons, stone walls, I-beams, and your small frame shook as freight cars rolled overhead, and you learned to wait patiently before facing larger powers or God. Friedrich von Schiller and the Squashed Crabapples. With his tall frame stepping eastward, Friedrich Schiller's statue looks over yellow apples that were squashed into the lawn. Did he pace through the night? Junipers flank his Vermont granite base. New American values once moved him, and his Ode to Joy still connects us to an enlightened, romantic Europe. Educated men adorned this artifice with clipped lawns and imported pines. Nearby, they rebuilt the pergola, the concrete pond, and the artificial falls. The weeping willow's shadow sweeps sorrow into any joy. Here, I'm deprived of wildness and pleasure domes of bittersweet berries, bloodroot, trillium, or grass snakes. The ruffed grouse aren't thrumming, and there are no turkeys to gobble. Wild delight is not part of Schiller's ode. I doubt he knew the joy of a fawn, awake in a hidden coulee, though I suspect he'd love the lingering rose wearing autumn's frost-burned petals. The Alzheimer's Patient in a Mercury sedan. How does a small nurse remove a smaller 90-year-old woman from a car seat when the old one has locked her knees, her spine, and elbows? She doesn't. Does the old woman retreat to her childhood? Does the sunlight through the windshield petrify her? Or does she practice her coffin posture? The nurse has to drive around the lake so that the sunlight dances off the waves and into the old woman's glazed green eyes. Yellowtail flickers swoop over the lawn, and the fountain's black statue begins to walk past the slow-moving Mercury. When they pull into my driveway, I wave and smile, and the old one opens her car door, hops up the step, and asks me for a cookie. Geese on the lake. Rafts of geese drift on the water and echo one another across the lake. An eagle chatters in the sunlight, and its rippling call breaks through the goose talk. The midday sky seems so large, and I can't see the predator anywhere. Above the park, a restless gang of younger geese punctures the sky. They're stretching their wings and seeking new waters. Then I hear my dead granny's voice. The eagle's screech is the same pitch as the old woman's rouse. "Wake up, Timmy!" Talking to the invisibles. At 3 a.m., I awaken and talk to the invisible ones. It's automatic now. I no longer care if I'm naive, ignorant, deluded, or cowardly. I'm at the inner end of what I know, the limit of my curiosity and courage. I haven't heard an invisible voice since I rented my first room in Como over 40 years ago. But each night now, I ask for the same assistance, and I expect the same quiet assurance. Closing accounts. This morning, Jesse stopped for breakfast on his way to his friend's wedding. We talked of flint knapping and the old growth woods that are dying near our former rural home. It's autumn. We need time in the woods. He dressed into his best man's tuxedo, and I sent him off with a jar of home-canned tomatoes and a pair of his grandfather's tie pins. He said he could use them when he returns to his banking job, closing the accounts of the deceased. A compass's arrow. Down the narrow peninsula, where a compass's arrow is sculpted into the granite walk, one man is fishing. The lake is like glass. The sky is damp. Half the leaves are gone from the branches. Along the shoreline, the rain gardens fill. Mist is in the air, and it's duck hunting weather. Men walk around the lake with hoods over their heads. Everyone is pulling into himself. As yellow willow brush die in their seasonal flames, dampness douses the fire inside those last leaves. Inside me, everything flattens and finds quiet. A breeze begins and riffles the lake. Above the distant trees, a church steeple peaks and shivers in its cold lake reflection. In my car door's mirror, the yellow leaves of the neighborhood trees are my indirect glimpses of God. One leash, 4 leads. I can only trust that dark space and stars are beyond the vast blue sky that opens above the trees. Every day at noon, a man with a cigar walks 4 corgi dogs on one leash and 4 branching leads. Blue smoke curls up. The leads open down to his turd factories and the constellations of curious amoebic beings. I followed a beetle. One November Sunday, I followed a beetle beneath red oak limbs and balsam boughs, lit by speckles of light. Eventually, I came to high bush cranberries, green clumps of cedar, and an elegant birch alone in a field of gray grass. Across the park field, I saw a leafless tree surrounded by oaks and decorated fully with yellow crab apples. The apples were the roe of a mythic salmon, and I stood inside its enormous, iridescent belly. Night 1, my birthday. We walked past the zoo's wolf run, where mates doze with their muzzles in their tails. We walked past the gated picnic pavilions, through the open field, then under the red bridge, where my voice won't echo as it did when I was a love-tormented teenager. In the southern sky, a half-moon shines through filmy clouds, We walk around the lake where street lamps reflect like gold candles on the dark water. We head out of the park, up a broken sidewalk, while street traffic scuttles like centipedes. After an hour walking with you on my birthday, we are wet with sweat, and I breathe your scent. Night 2, Thanksgiving. Tonight, we walk the lake in the opposite direction. Waves crash the shore and snow pellets sting my cheek. It's 40 degrees colder than last night, but this polar cleansing is refreshing. Our faces are soon wet and cold and happy. Our coats are white and crusty with clean snow. Street lamps are pale discs of color, and the half moon lights the clouds from behind. We walk quickly, reveling in the scour of the season's first snowstorm. Finally, like Thanksgiving dinner's dishes, our discomforts are cleaned and put away. Sunday morning, 2 a.m., 1965. Snow fell like apple blossoms, and the street was unmarked and white. At 2 a.m., after babysitting Glenn's 6 kids, I walked home from Hedrick's as blackness bordered the near edge of night. Minutes before, I was asleep on Glenn's couch. Then I walked through the hiss in the air and put my footprints onto untouched snow. The pavement showed my fresh path out of our Irish neighborhood. With $10 and no one expecting me yet, I walked on, making my tracks onto our street and in the park, licking the flakes of manna dropped by city haloed clouds. On the hillside overlooking the lake, with a stick, I wrote a poem in the snow. I wanted Sunday morning mass goers to see what I found dropping from above and the work that could be done while they slept. Walking around thin ice with the epigraph, Yo soy yo y mis circunstancias by Jose Ortega y Gasset. The temperature has fallen 60 degrees in a week. It's still snowing as we walk around the lake, and there's no one else on our circuit. A foot of snow fell on the thin ice, which can't hold the weight. Cracked ice waters the snow from below, and tomorrow the slush will freeze. The park was never so beautiful. Every tree is cloaked in snow. The chill is real, but an inner fire melts the raw snow from our cheeks. Until that fire goes out, we will keep walking in storms, for we love one another and these natural extremes. Our love is like water. It changes things. It changes us, and it changes our surroundings. Christmas walk. The raw cold under my chin and against my open neck isn't bad. There's a joy in it. Like sledding on the snow hills or skating across Como Lake after Sunday afternoon hockey. After the figure skaters' flirtations, or years later, after lumber work in the Pine County forests. Tonight, as I stroll with my wife, joy comes swiftly in our cold and reverent city. The final 2 weeks. The spindly spruce looks so small on its side in the snow. For 2 weeks, lights, baubles, and beads adorned it for Christmas. That tree grew in the woods my father bought, then sold to his sons. In October, he shriveled in his bed for 2 weeks before he died. His children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren swarmed him with kisses, laughter, smiles, and tears. Now the frost on the spruce boughs reminds me of his whiskers and his cheeks, which I rubbed as the morticians rolled him away. Up at 4 a.m. My suede slippers are worn at the edges. As things get older, that happens. This morning in the new snow, cars tracked and pressed the snow into ragged ridges going toward the dark. According to old Christian tales, angels' wings are made of feathers, and what makes our street pretty might be nothing more than the dust of their tired, frayed wings. Your pirate soul holds joy. Oak leaves like tiny Nordic boats ride the cold sea of new snow. I want to sit in one and steer past the gaudy traps of wistfulness and desire's rueful shadows. To decorate the yard, you've poked red osier twigs into the yews. I look up and see that the icicles on our eaves hold rippling sunlight the way your pirate soul holds joy. Abide the winter. On each of the past 4 nights, an inch of snow fell lightly. Winter's ugliness is hidden. Morning sunlight pinkens the rooftops, and icicles dangle like daggers. With a mouth full of bird seed, a small vole darts into its snow hole beneath the sundial. There's always another side to the story seen from a window. Sedans are moving like cattle. The man with a sad job holds his daughter tightly, and she wiggles to get away. At first, the dent to his car door felt fatal, but that time has not come. A clump of snow drops from the spruce bough and breaks apart like a herd of dying butterflies who cannot abide the winter. But I must. I love too many friends, and I love the smell of babies and songs and early dawns of May. Hard snow amplifies loneliness. The tracks are a mile away, but the train seems nearby. Hard snow amplifies its struggling loneliness. The January thaw is tempered by shriveled snow piles, crusty edges, and each night's deepening freeze. Some days my memory is wet with sadness. Some days I'm an icicle, battered by wintry winds. The voyeur and the pose. Beside the snow-blanketed sundial, our garden's metal heron holds a foot of snow on its back. A fine pose. Blue-green curves beneath a diva's thick white mink. Suddenly, warmed by the sun, the bird seems to shake, and through the window I watch the snow slide off the bird, which becomes naked, still, and erotic. Where steam rose from a hidden cave. My fireplace grate is cold, unusable on these bleak days. An unseen wind shivers the treetops, and the sky is as pale as a frightened child. These days remind me of my childhood winters, when I couldn't see above snowbanks. As the sun sets oddly, My wife rages against the starless dusk. At the feeder, the last sparrow separates sunflower seeds from the smallest grains he prefers. He eats, then huddles into the ewes. I look at an etching of the woodland hills where I once lived. I remember the coulee, where steam rose from a hidden cave as temperatures fell to -50. Even when despair touches emptiness, tiny heat lifts its flag and is seen for miles. Into the fur of the inner voice. Sometimes it's important to pray where you once played at the wildlife. The cold snow on the lake's ice, your bony knee on the snow, your childhood face to the sky. A lone ice fisherman sits on an overturned bucket. He drops his line into the black hole beside his toboggan. This isn't loneliness. It's how another man prays in winter. On this shore, the willow is naked, but the fisherman is bulky, a black triangle on hard water. Beyond him is the shore, where your hard life turned toward the furry voice inside you, Timothy. Beyond that shore, in the empty fountain, inside a green storage crate, a naked copper nymph holds her cornucopia. Maybe she is praying for spring. A false cricket and the woodpecker. A false cricket chirps inside the house. It's midwinter, and I shouldn't hear it. When I go to scrape the car windows, I hear a woodpecker talking too. Sure enough, a large, red-crested pileated is dancing on the maple tree across the street. It stops at a crease in the trunk and begins to hammer for food. I talk back, clear the frost, and go buy a newspaper. When I return home, he's gone. Later, when I take out the trash, he calls again, from the back neighbor's tree. The atmosphere is heavy with moisture. High overhead, I hear a jet through the gray. From the house, the false cricket begins again, and its chirp fades as the jet passes eastward. There are so many things I can't see, but I hear them or smell them, and remember to turn at the last second as a snowball hits me in the heart and my wife doubles over in laughter. Better late than never. 2 nights ago, a barking dog woke me. Flashing strobes had the yard looking like a dance floor. The police had stopped a drunk in front of my neighbor's house, and once the cop frisked the driver, cuffed him, and pushed him into a second squad, I went back to bed. Last night, just past midnight, a helicopter droned overhead with its ominous battering winds. The large cloud of sound drifted east, and when the night grew serene, I turned off my reading light and lay back on the pillow. We've passed the equinox, and the city begins an awkward renewal. Daffodils have pushed up leaves beneath my furnace vent, then froze in the last blizzard. Daffodils and tulips are tough beauties. They will return. Better late than never. The first robin after a long winter. While drinking my first cup of coffee before dawn, I hear the first spring robin singing. The chirrup comes through walls and into my dark living room. It pierces the air when the furnace stops. On the screen porch, I feel the prick of ice in the pre-dawn air, and I feel cold cement through my socks. But the first spring robin is singing, and the singing fills the space between the trees and above the clustered houses. My curiosity turns to joy. That old friend is back after its trip south, back to sing after our dogged steps through winter. We took my mom to the hospital because the left corner of her mouth droops. She has a lesion on the right lobe of her brain. She smiled when she told me that she begins her passage to the arms of my dead father. May the robins give her a fanfare. Thinking in spring. The ice-covered lake opens at the shore. The cold water fish are almost asleep, yet people circle the lake. They talk in pairs and spin their thoughts toward the drifting clouds. A small black form, it's an eagle, almost as high as the white clouds, circles on thermals, and then it's gone. My thinking lifts out of my dreams, which lift from my blood, bones, and malleable flesh, which lifted out of root vegetables, grass-fed meat, and stupid fish, which lifted from the mess of cold mud, dark water, and refracting sunlight. Wasps. Wasps built a nest inside the clothesline crosspipe, the perfect weatherproof place for an urban wasp, safe and secure, with a tunnel opening onto the garden. My wife's bird bath supplies constant water, and her flowers adorn the wasp's commute. However, my wife is allergic to bee stings, and I've just sprayed chemicals into the pipe and killed the wasp family. Simple regret, simple sadness. I wish they would have moved when I asked. After a beautiful rain, droplets fall from the peony buds. I'm struggling. This is difficult. A friend and poet just died. My neighbor sledges his sidewalk and throws the concrete pieces into a large metal trash bin. Bonka, bonka, bonka. It's too early for disruption and this demolition. The Sunday before Memorial Day. An ornery wren confronts a squirrel who squawks back. The neighbor's large dog barks at the irritated and gathering crows. Everyone's quarreling on this hot May morning. Even the planes roar at us. No one is in the mood for memorials at the cemetery. At the end of June. No songbirds this morning at the end of June. No breeze, no cloud, no morning dog walker. The morning's as still as the air in a cave. I loved this kind of quiet when I had the farm. No traffic, no chatter, no ratty squirrels, scampering and scratching and scrambling. The hot day will have its own weight. So I'm loving the heavy silence now. I love blizzards and drizzle and a bold sun dropping into dusk. I love loud cardinals and robins who try to outsing one another, although today I love only the silence. Finally, this rare city silence is broken by a distant jet as quiet as a scratch on velvet. It's so far away and it's gone so quickly. The stillness must have swallowed it. The sun is rising. All is calm, all is bright, and the stillness continues until a man loudly pushes a stroller and child past my house. He must be letting Mom sleep in. Then two cardinals challenge one another with a volume as large as an amplified iPhone. Another airliner scratches the open sky and scars the flat blue expanse of stillness. Two old men speedwalk on the sidewalk, trying together to outrun their demise. A first gray Mazda hums toward the market, where a delivery truck beeps into reverse. And a third airliner scrapes a perpendicular gouge across the other's scar. Miles away, a freight train struggles up an incline. A crotch rocket motorcycle tears down the avenue toward the freeway. As the sun breaks through the maple and blinds me, the cardinals change their songs to chortles. Across my back fence, air conditioners roar to life. Overhead, a jet begins its descent to the MSP airport. Another jet climbs toward emptiness with the whine and whoosh of the murderous intentions of progress. More autos, more trucks, more overhead planes, buzzing like wasps around the gray paper globe. I yell, "Stop!" Silence is alive, too. You're killing it. But the airliners increase their disturbances, and I hear a siren coming. He stops next door. Crossing Calvary. After every high school day, I crossed Calvary Cemetery and walked over the old graves that were level with the sod and showed neither rise nor depression. It was the way home. Even after Friday night dances, I'd hop the back fence about midnight, past the darkened mausoleums, and rush toward the front gate, which was guarded by a 20-foot angel with a sword. Once in a while, a flash of light would jolt my nerves, until I convinced myself. It's just a reflection off a headstone from a car outside the fence. I had to learn that lamplight travels furthest, where darkness is deepest, and when darkness said differently, I already knew I was not alone. Counting coops in stockinged feet past midnight. I rode shotgun while Jimmy drove old Valiant down alleyways in Falcon Heights or Roseville's garden paths, where college professors and strange tribes of men slept in their ramblers and ranch houses. Jimmy slowed as I opened the door, then ran ahead without noise. No sand crunching, no cloth rustling, just the sweet breezes through lilacs. Street lamps cast hard shadows, so I easily moved through night holes. I didn't want your daughter, your inside jewels, the cat, the dog, or your parrot. I wanted pony parts. A taillight lens, a red one with trim for a Mustang. I wanted a die-hard battery for my unpredictable Mercury, and a generator for old Valiant. When I found the GMC Suburban, I used my tools efficiently. With a young man's gall and one tear of remorse, I left a 10-spot on the housing. With the battery gone, cable snakes curled around Hamilton's juiceless face. Stars shimmied. The neighborhood was quiet. So still, I wondered, who could live in a Federalist house, or those colonials safely sleeping away? This is a longer prose poem called Don't Forget Gramps, or 6 Ways to Leave the Old Neighborhood. Don't forget Gramps. They called me Gramps. By 18, I had gray hairs among the dark ones, and I wore a necklace of boils and an acne scapular. I wore piebald undershirts stained with blood and pus front and back beneath my flannel shirts. Yet the curse of acne was the blessing that helped me run out the front door of the Minneapolis Induction Center, and I headed home, rejected by the army doctor. Everyone else went out the back door, boarded a bus to the airport, flew to Fort Bragg or Camp Lejeune and boot camp. 6 months later, they were at the Mekong River. Don't forget how Crazy Bob, Sneaky Pete, Cootie, and Steverino came back, howled with me, their sidekick and documentarian. They yelled at me, "Tell our tales, fucker. We're all motherfuckers and Como scuzzers, all of us, and we'll stay that way till we die." Don't forget 80 miles per hour on the interstate, in a camper, without tie-downs, in Crazy's pickup. And we mocked the wind as the wind lifted us 4 inches off the pickup's floor. And we begged Bob to drive 90. Don't forget smelt fishing at Lake Superior's shore with Cootie, Sneaky Pete, and Crazy Bob, all of us in chest waders, dipping oversized nets into the icy Knife River current, trying to scoop schools of horny silver fish. We mostly failed, and we didn't care. Don't forget those few smelt like scaly pricks in a bucket while we drank to oblivion. Sneaky Pete and I stuffed the smelt down the back of Cootie's pants after he passed out, and he rolled in his stupor, squishing and squashing and scratching, mushing and mashing fish flesh into his hinder's crack. Hours later, when he woke up stinking and unfazed, he laughed with us at his own mess. Then Strawberry came back, yowling like a panther. "It's not me, it's the rest of the world." He had eaten shame. In the Marine Corps and at home, he ate shame. He nearly drowned in a training pool because he couldn't swim, especially with a pack. "You're no Marine, Strawberry." They laughed as he sank like his big rig's gearbox, and they yanked him out flopping like a bullhead without whiskers. He volunteered for Nam 4 times while driving semis in Okinawa, and they turned him down. "You're no Marine, Strawberry." 2 years after his honorable discharge, he strung himself from a pipe in my basement, strangled himself while gurgling on the phone with his ex. Then Crazy Bob caught his wife humping his best friend. He drove his Harley 100 miles an hour off Dead Man's Curve, long before Thelma and Louise did it movie style. Steverino, the sniper, returned from the jungle with his feet crusted and stained to black. He bragged that he had changed his boots only twice during his year-long tour. 10 years later, he divorced Crazy Bob's sister and finally married his high school sweetie. Then his migraines began. He hit her once, went into the bedroom, put his pistol in his mouth, and sucked lead. His dad, a World War II vet, offed himself in the 50s. His stepdad, a Korean War vet, did it too in the 60s. We blamed his icy-eyed mom. We were wrong. After Nam, after smashed cars and mashed fists, after fights and cackling, crackling liquored days, Cootie asked 27 women to marry him for love. I witnessed 6 of those proposals myself. I wrote a story in 1983 about Cootie's love life, and I won a literary award in the humor division. After a few divorces, his body gave out to the weight his drinking could no longer withstand. Minutes before he flew out of Nam, Sneaky Pete locked his sergeant in a remote meat freezer. Once back in St. Paul, he spent his money and lost his money on hookers, craps, and painkillers. Then he simply disappeared into suburban fog. In the 70s, Strawberry and Crazy Bob left this neighborhood, while Steverino waited until the 80s. In the 90s, the old neighborhood died for me when I married and moved out of state. What do I do for my neighborhood friends, the friends who were sprayed like high-octane fuel through the cultural carburetors and into the cylinders of hatred's machinery. What do I do with the neighborhood's compost? Turn it and turn it with the pitchfork of my pen till the shit's so old it's sweetness. What do I do because they once yelled, "Don't forget, Gramps! Don't forget our tales, our Como Scuzzer tales. Don't forget, Gramps." 1973, Gramps at 23. Why blind dates? We were 23, and I could tell the girl had no interest in me. Was it my clothes, my name, my looks, or my aura? Pete's girlfriend of 2 weeks introduced me. This is Gramps. It's just a nickname. Even though he has a lot of gray hair, we love him. I wore a blue denim work shirt, the kind the banker's son wore to defy his parents. And I wore to be like my Gramps, the cowboy. Was it a class issue as she ran from the suburbs? Was it shame or arrogance or simple disinterest? We were sitting beside the park's mermaid fountain, and I was ready for a cold beer and its healthy foam. The blue sky matched my shirt. White cirrus were scouting for the storm clouds. We didn't know it then. Pete's girl was pregnant. Had she used undue familiarity because Pete had affectionately named me, or to ingratiate herself or her rigid friend? A month later, when he took her for the abortion, the doctor told them she was too far along. Did she use me to tighten the noose of her lie? Was it another way to get into Pete's head so he would pay for her other man's abandonment and pay for her loneliness and her fear? We didn't know it then. We were all lonely and afraid and arrogant and 23. Wisdom held the red rag. Wisdom held the red rag that I used to wipe up the spill. I was tormented after I deliberately poured a pitcher of water onto her flannel-clad body on the hotel bed. After she rolled to the dry half of the mattress. After she showed her contempt with a cold, silent stare. Earlier, on New Year's Eve, she had been kissing every drinking man on the dance floor, but not me, and she wouldn't tell me why. Wisdom was the long, narrow concourse 2-hour flight home, and I said nothing, because my nervous system wanted to expand beyond the tarmacs and the Hollywood Hills. In the mechanized tunnel, wisdom was in the industrial carpet as it cushioned my steps, and wisdom doused my cigarette lighter's flame as I trod head down toward the red-eye express. God's in everything, even the darkness. Yesterday, I walked in the park, and I thought, God's in everything. Yet, I didn't feel happy or holy. My gloom is tar in the road cracks, a simple repair job to get me by. God is in everything, even the darkness. And I saw machines demolishing the shower rooms and chewing the blue concrete of the pool where I learned to dive into the deep end. 40 years ago, under the drooping lilac, I stopped a gangbang there, and the splayed girl on the warm Chevrolet swore at me, and the young men swore at me, and they all left, so I could climb over the fence and swim alone in the dark. Sometimes a swimming pool fills with disease. Sometimes lilacs are allergens. Sometimes bursting green elms are preparing to fall. Yesterday I walked through the park. I wasn't happy, although I thought, God's in everything, even the darkness. Calvin is 2.5 years old. Calvin lives next door, and when I open my door, I hear a tiny voice from his porch. "Hi, team," his mother says. "You've become his best friend." I do little but reflect his pleasure with mine. Calvin runs to his gate and grins from inside his hooded rain jacket. Like a talker in sanctified tongues, he jumps and wiggles and throws his hands in the air. Such joy to greet a toddler who greets me first. Such joy to share raspberries from my patch and watch his face pucker and squint when he takes another berry with his deft fingers. Our joy renews in this garden of delight. My joy is the redbird's cheery song. My joy is a raindrop across my cheek. His joy is a dance in the drizzle. Let's share something. 3 yellow squash flowers are in an orange vase on the round dining room table. My mother gave me that table. 50 years ago, my father bought it from his father's childhood friend, who had to leave her farm for the old folks' home. The vines of memory are Earth's gift, and the earth is God's gift, and my God is the gift of abundance. Tolerance. Because of the torrid weather, I haven't mowed the lawn for 3 weeks. We haven't fertilized or reseeded grass, so the clover has spread about. Its small white flowers feed the house finches and bunnies. Robins pull up worms, and each morning I walk barefoot through the dew. Because of our tolerance, daisies have burst in the middle of the lawn. They've not forgotten their beauty, nor have we. They stay, too. The function of cords. While mounting a new handrail along the basement stairs, I opened the old power drill case, the black leather one with the patched hasp. Suddenly, I smelled my father. What a surprise. Last winter, a man asked why I keep out-of-date tools on my workbench. He said, "A cordless drill would be much more convenient. Why be hampered by the function of cords?" Even among the oily drill bits spilled in the case, I smelled Dad's body, as if we were in his meat shop, the one attached to the garage where we processed beef cattle, pigs, and deer in season. Once I skinned a black bear there. Fat had grown thick and greasy between the hide and flesh, and I almost swam into its wildness. And then Dad butchered the bear for Mr. Bailey. When my father died, he left me knives, tools, and a sense of justice, but not his facility for handiwork. My favorite knife has a blade 4 inches wide, 12 inches long, and as sharp as lasting gratitude. He bought that blade with its handle missing at a rummage sale, and my Gramps fashioned a new handle. That knife cut fresh baked bread, Grandma's, Mom's, and my wife's, for more than 60 years. Before he died, Dad asked me to pass it to my son when the time is right. Dad's initials, Gramps and mine, are burned on the handle with room for Jesse's monogram. Who's to say the dead don't have fun? I'm singing harmony in a dream as Uncle Willie sings, "Freedom just another word for nothing left to lose." Dad and Uncle Jim sing beside us in our circle. Then Uncle Willie turns away and turns back with his big grin. the one he had after a beer or two. And he lifts his finger and says to me, "Here's the lost verse to me and Bobby McGee." And he sings of horses and roping in Norman, Oklahoma. Suddenly, Uncle Chuck is outside our circle. He holds his harmonica high and signals that he wants to join us and play his signature tune, "Going to take a sentimental journey." Uncle Charlie is 92, and tears come every time he plays his Hohner chromatic. His brothers are dead, and he's still alive, and I'm still alive, and I'm smiling. One dove on a wire. One dove mourns above the neighborhood. A round note from its small, plump breast spreads through the trees, garages, parked cars, and empty backyard tables. As the small, dark mass spreads in her head, the flower of my mother's life wilts in a rumpled bed. Green and gold. On the far edge of the garden, a small, stunted sunflower pokes through the ground flowers. From beneath the red and white impatiens, a yellow face on a slender stem struggles toward light. Oh, the stubbornness of light, the persistence of beauty, trying to come into the light again and again and again. My mother died in the blue light of a rising moon. With her Irish stubbornness, I hope she and our dead kin have joy in her heaven, all green and gold and seeded with light. Wild Rose for Rosemary Quinn Young. This wild rose scoffs at fragility and adorns itself, its hips, flowers, and exultant leaves, for the glory of persistence, hardiness, and wild divine abundance. O wild rose with buffalo sturdiness and hummingbird beauty, you are a bobcat beside a water willow. You're the mother plant of civilized religions. You're the grandmother of modern love. The garage floor cracked. This year, the rains came early. Then the drought began, and the ground pulled into itself. A week after my mother's funeral, the cement floor cracked in the garage. Maybe I've stored too many oak boards in the rafters, and when the weight shifted as the earth moved, the floor cracked. The wood is an inheritance from my father. The garage is Depression era, built when my folks were toddlers. Now my mother's dead too. I'm the next in line for death, so the structures of my life must change. Why should I think the weight should be less, or that I could avoid cracking? Our old dog gets up slowly. Our old dog gets up slowly to exclaim his life by dribbling on all four of my truck tires. He must trust that my truck and I will carry his innermost message to others. Blues in August. I'm feeling blue. I'm a failure. I'm lost as a man. I'm aching and bored flipping a shoe polish can. Lost my farm, lost my aim, lost my dog, lost my plans. Now I'm stuck watching game shows in television land. Ain't the blue sky blue? Ain't the river dark and brown? I've run out of reasons for not going down. There's a frog in the backyard. He's a mile from home, and he's hiding in the daisies, pretending he's a stone. He's looking for something. He's still sleek and wet. He's determined to travel 'cause he's not dead yet. Wherever he wanders in his memory or soul, he's mixing down silver and churning up gold. A lone duck flies away. A lone duck flies away from the sunrise. It's working hard above the leaves. They're changing colors and their frail stems are about to loosen from dark, thin twigs. Paul's wife divorced him and he's broken. Like a cloud gives way to the blue sky, that enormous veil of emptiness upon which we rely. If a duck can streak through the air, maybe we should go swimming, musky-like, into the inland sea of grief and toward an eye of electrified emptiness. We no longer call them spinsters. She and her sister loved Dickens, the Brontes, and Agatha Christie mysteries from the BBC. We no longer call such women spinsters, but they still live in their family home, a white stucco in a good neighborhood. Father had owned a shoe store. Mother taught English literature and loved to tell the various versions of Cinderella. Even now, they like to walk out in a wild wind and let it blow through their lengthening white hair. Bridesmaids in strapless purple gowns. During our walk around calm Como Lake, beautiful gold lights wiggle on the black water. The walkway's clad with autumn leaves, a comfortable quiet, and a hint of cigarette smoke. Lights jiggle in the pavilion's upstairs hall as a wedding dance blasts behind thick windows. As we pass, bridesmaids in strapless purple gowns smoke cigarettes outside the door. They are sharp-boned women with voices like a field of sandburrs. One has already changed her clothes and heads to the parking lot saying, "I'll be back," but she walks like a woman who won't. Voting in the old neighborhood. I just returned from voting. The polls were busy, and a happy exuberance filled our rec center. A year ago today, my dad was buried from the church across the street, while 500 folks grieved. As I entered to vote, swans flew overhead in a V, calling to me as they headed toward the Mississippi. This is the first time in decades that I voted in my home precinct, and I felt the ground as I have not felt it in years. Grateful tears welled as I waited for my wife to finish. It doesn't matter what the money mongers or haters do or say if they win. They won't take away my deep affection for my friends, my family, and the songs we've shared. V is for victory and peace. The swans rule.